just remind, just a few days ago I spoke with Estonian Speaker of Parliament, who is a socialist. We have a party with a socialist, Christian Democrats and liberals. Prime Minister is a liberal. And I asked about he's a leading member and is the oldest member of Estonian Parliament. He has been 20 years in Parliament. And then I asked him that why are you socialist, you supporting this flat tax? And he said that, by the way, liberals, they do not know it's a socialistic. and then he explained me why it is socialistic. But it's a very nice explanation. And sometimes it's very good that the different parties from different wings, they have something common. Maybe their views are different. One say that it's a good for the people. Anyway, we have to think that maybe Estonian socialists or social democrats are a bit more centrist than average in Europe. But this is the other case. Thank you very much to inviting me. I just this week on Monday present my credence letter to your president, and next week your head of state are going to visit Estonia, and there are in program there will be a lot of so-called ITC things. The other hand, I am quite happy that my teenager son doesn't know about that I'm here, because I'm afraid he then maybe can make a call and say that I would like to say that my father and ICT and computerizations, and I want something to say to you. The problem is nothing to say. So. The picture I would like to share with you is from my own experience. I am quite ordinary. I am not any good in IT things, but I, as a consumer, would use it some 20 years from the beginning, and what I know about it. And just a few examples how I use it in my homeland, how I have used it abroad as well. But first, can I sit down? Yes? No. To the chair, yes. So, short view about. Oops. I just program the full screen.
It's full screen.
It's a full screen. Okay, that's for me. Okay. Very shortly, Estonia is yes one of the smallest states in the European Union. And you can see that we are quite Nordic, climate is not the best one. Sometimes it does help, because I know that our neighbors, Finns, who are our relatives by the language and so on, the main techno centers they have on the quite north, because then the peoples are more committed to sit behind the computers and invent a lot of very nice things. Oops. So you can see that Estonia is surrounded by the sea, mostly from the west and from the north, and it's one of the quite big lake from the east, and as you see, sorry, in principle we're thinking that we are locating quite northern Europe, and therefore we have a historical linkage with our Nordic neighbor, mostly with Sweden, with Finland, and of course by historical reason with Russia as well. So, very often I have to show where Estonia is really located. Okay, I am not very handy to. Okay. So, political system is a parliamentary democracy. Head of state are elected 5 years. unicameral parliament, and as I mentioned, the Prime Minister is from Reform Party. It's a liberal in Estonia, and during the time when Estonia restored independence, more than half a period, the Prime Minister has been liberal. Toomas Hendrik Ilves, he is a social democrat, but he was born in Stockholm, grown up in the United States. Estonian social democrats are a bit differs maybe from the other post-socialist countries, because our Social Democratic Party was a party who left after the occupation by the Soviets in 1944, and they exist abroad 50 years, and then they returned to Estonia, and in principle the roots are from the 30s. We had the other Socialist Party, successor from the Communist Party, but they have a 0.2% support. I just try to which no. I don't know why this photo is here, but it's a normal Estonian landscape. Maybe therefore that there are quite a lot of movies done in Hollywood or somewhere, because for them is a very nice name, Estonia, and they are thinking that it's connected to stone, and the stone is from the Stone Age something. And I would like to say that this, the stones and stone connection, it's a Estonia internet connection. Two main points. That internet access is a social right in Estonia. Everybody has the right to internet, and they have to work. There are sometimes even a bit problematic that some post offices in the small countrysides are going to close and put the computer and say that you have every service you can hear. Now a question mark, is internet access as part of human rights? I think that Estonians are thinking that yes, it is. And maybe if you travel somewhere and you have a connecting flight on some airport, and you can see that there are internet, but it's you have to pay for that, or it does not work, and then you think about that it's a good time to take a rest. Then if you see some very nervous guys, these are Estonians. The very first steps for the e-governance and e-solutions, it began on the early 90s. And by the way, one of the initiators was our current president, who then was Estonian ambassador in USA. And it was his idea to start so-called Tiger Leap and build Tiger Leap Foundation to find money to support computerization and internetization of all Estonian schools. Estonia was quite poor this time, and we need a lot of sponsors and we need international help, but we funded money, and I think it was a first and very early step. The next one was followed to build 500 public internet access points, because in 2000 there were no such big amount of computers, and still they were quite expensive, but especially on the countryside, in each library you had the public access to the computers and to using internet. Now maybe you remember, or someone remember, that in the early 90s, when the internet starts, it was really very slow. I remember 1994, in the foreign ministry, in press department, I had a colleague. He switched computer and said that after 10 minutes I have 3 pages New York Times, and went the other room to read paper newspapers. And it was. One thing what we need to develop, that's a personal IT card. First it was introduced 2002, and there was really a lot of joke about it, and they asked, why do we need it? Yes, it's smaller than passports, but why? It was very popular to say that it's very, very good because we have in Estonia quite cold winter to clean windows of the cars or plastic cars. But now the more than 94% of the populations are using it. 6%, I think it's quite older people who are not interesting, and all the residents had to be with this card. Now I remember the other story. It's a bit legend, but I have asked these people, and they say that more or less this happened such way. It was year 2000 when one Estonian so-called IT guru approached to our Prime Minister. Prime Minister was then 38 years old, quite old. And the IT man said that, you know, I have a concrete proposal what we have to do. We need eGovernment. And then Prime Minister was thinking a little while and say, yes, but now there are 3 points I need for that. Tomorrow you will work as my advisor. We need it start to work after 6 months. And the third one, we have no money for that. But in principle, it started after 6 months to work. And one reason why it succeeded was that big banks started to support. It was a special agreement between government and the leading banks about this project, because there was great interest of Estonian banks to develop internet banking and access. And very first stage, when ID card was not so spreaded, the banks, via Banks Canal, they guaranteed security of approaching personal data. With the time, IT cards started to use much more, and more information you can get with ID card. It was very important that the very first ID cards Estonia issued, we had a chip information there. And a bit later, it's developing further. It's a mobile ID, which in principle the same, but that means that you don't need to wear your ID card always with you. It's enough you have a mobile ID, in principle, mobile card. It is your ID or your chip in this case. The main word is a trusting. You have to trust security of this system. And very often there are saying, and I think partly it's true, that it was very easy this things to start in Estonia because it's a small state, small community. We broke from the Soviets, that we started from zero, and it's very easy to manage and organize. But in principle, a key word is here is thinking, and the other is trust. Trusting the things. It always has been a very big discussion with the Germans, because they have question mark, why do you trust these things? Why your people trust e-voting and all this solution? Because they said that someone can enter or hacked this program and are going to take your personal data. But it's really the question of the trusting. Just one example. A few years ago I worked as a non-resident ambassador to Serbia. And there appears that they have IT cards with chip. They have a very good IT specialist as well. So what we did, we gave them one core system, free of charge. It's called X-Road. And then via public procurement, Estonian, this system to build e-governance was winning, but then Microsoft and the others, they sued this in the court system, and it's now suspended. And the other thing was that there are options in Serbia to take the cards with chip or without. And the approach is that, in principle, you know that there are now recommendations for your dogs, pet dogs, to put the chip, and then you can, or someone can follow the dog as well. And people are thinking that if I have IT card with chip with me, then someone can follow me all the time. I think in Estonia we have an approach that if you have a mobile phone with you, it's much easier if someone would like to follow you. Or even you can find in your Facebook really much more information than anywhere else. So in this key word here is trusting. And by the way, there in Serbia was the other problem as well, because I think why Microsoft was very eager to fight against it, because they had thinking that if there will be the core system, or so-called the system backbone X-Road from Estonia, that means that all these next development solutions has to take or at least license from Estonians, or all these Estonian companies are going to work there. But in principle, this X-Road system, the big plus is that it's only connection. Why it started very good work between Estonian ministries, between private companies, because banking, because IT guys everywhere, they understood that there are not any intervention that they have to change how to write the scripts or anything else. It's just they can do, as we always do, just the changing of the data, changing of the information. In Estonia we think that what is the information society indicators now? As I mentioned, after the Tiger Leap, 100% of schools are now in internet, and of course all the government organization, countries covered by the broadband. 1990 and 8% bank transfers are performed electronically. And what is really very popular has been, it's 98 of income tax declaration made via the e-transport. It's a thing why I know that the president candidate Bush now is promoting these things as well, but it cannot be very popular in the United States because there are thousands of lawyers who have the money for that, because it's a very tricky system there. In our case, usually I need 5 minutes for my income tax declaration. Here in Slovakia, you need it?
Yeah, we have also an e-tax system which had quite a lot of controversy to it, because it was redone like 2 times, and the result is that the system is still failing. So the situation here is maybe not that.
No, anyway, it's I don't know this why 2% are not using this. but it's really very good. It's 5 minutes, and last time, the second day, they returned the money, because there are some things which different school fees for the children and so on and so on. And if I have not the other incomes, I can add, of course, if I have some business or. But usually all my incomes, if I write somewhere article or something, I see, because it's in principle in internet they are pre-written. I just leave. Oh, I receive their money. This money doesn't. Yes, accept, send. And I think it's economized a lot of money, because I remember some 15 years ago, it take I think 3-4 hours one evening. It was really very nasty. The thing which is quite unique in Estonia, I think it's internet voting. It's a lot of person, it's not secure, and so on and so on. We in Estonia were thinking that it's enough secure, and last elections approximately 1/3 of the electorate used e-voting system. And I think it's the only one. Why we use internet voting? Because there are simultaneously using electronic voting, but that means that you go to polling station and go to cabin, and there are some electronic equipment, and you put the numbers there. Sometimes they use it. Not to mix internet voting and the other ones. And there are a lot of questions that in internet it's not secure, because someone, let's say bad guy, can stand behind you and say that you have to put this number, or the other hand, I will pay for that, please put this number. Why I said it's more safer, that's, you know, in principle, you can vote now by the ordinary mail as well. The other things, you can go to the polling station, and if you would like to collaborate with the bad guys who give you money, then they said that, yeah, if you put the crest, please make the photos with your cellular phone. And if you bring the photos back, I check it and I will give you money. Why it's, the internet voting is better? In principle, you can change your mind. You can re-elect during these days how much you would like. And in principle, yes, you can make the business that different representatives of different parties are coming. That okay, you said that it's €5 for one vote. How many people do you have? 80. Let's start for you. But in principle, that means that the last voting is effective. The other one you did before, it's deleting automatically. And that means that there are not sense to pay it or to press the guy, because he can change it afterwards. 5 years ago, there was one lady, and she was voting 68 times. Then the guys from the security policy were interested what's going on, because you know, in e-environment there are always some path. She was a very active lady. She had a very big number of favorite politicians, except those who are on the power. And then she said, but it's my right to vote how much I want. And she was right. Then the security policy was okay, but it's a bit strange, but it's your right. So it's one reason why it's more secure, I think. There are the other pluses. I think it's a problem everywhere that the electorate, the real electorate who are ready to go to polling stations, it's becoming older and older. Young generation, they are not so interesting to go there. But if it's just a fun business at the computer, then just 2 minutes, and it's very easy to do. Okay, I put it. That means that in principle, in the general elections or in election, there are much more votes from the young generation. You know that I think here in Slovakia is pretty same that a lot of people are working abroad, behind the border. Same in Estonia, and a lot of people are working in Finland and our neighbor states. We have a very good connection with Finland. That means that the people spend Monday morning to work and returning by boat on Friday evening. But some are living quite a long time, and a lot of students are living abroad. The Foreign Ministry and the embassies, they are organizing the possibility for them to come to the embassies and give the vote. But usually the number of these people are quite small. And embassies are usually on the capitals, but universities, workplaces, they are in the other places. But if you have your own access, you have e-voting, you can do where you want. During your holidays abroad, under the palms, one you need, it's good if you have internet. If you have not internet, you can use your mobile as well for connecting to the internet. The other pluses. I'm living in Estonia in one small island, let's say. It's far from capital, not so far. Let's say 2 hours by car and just 25 minutes by boat. But I'm registered, I'm a patriot of this island. I don't like to pay my taxes to the capital. I think they have enough money and they don't know how to waste it sometimes. But time to time happened municipality elections. I'm working abroad. But it's very important for me, the guy who has a local government, because in this lead this community. In this case, I can vote abroad as well in the municipality elections. What is not possible if I have not e-elections, and it's what's not very often possible as in my own country, but not in my home constituency. Maybe the main achievements what we reached is first it was 2000, we started with e-export, then it was mobile parking, then it was ID bus ticket. So I said that the more and more information is possible to solve via ID card. For example, when in principle in Estonian drivers, we don't need to use our driving license with us when we are in Estonia. It's enough that we have our ID card with us. In principle, it's enough when we know our ID code. So, 2007 was launched the e-policy system. That means that a policeman, they have access for your information. They can say that, oh, this guy, it's not first time. When you speed limit, you forgot about speed limit. It's repeatedly. But the other hand, and I said, yes, it was too fast, but it's the first time during past 5 years. Okay, we just warning you, put the signature and go on. Same is a e-health system. That means that your personal information for your health, medical doctors have right to approach. For example, your doctors are in one town, but you are the other one. And then you got serious medical problems. But usually, if you are going to not this hospital or this town, then they start again to learn your health, the blood, and so on, and it's taken time. But in this case, if you have a e-health in computer, then the doctors, they have a right to look your personal data and say, oh, you have this disease, we can use immediately these medicaments. The same things are in principle with e-prescriptions. You are traveling, but forgot about your medicaments. Then you can call to a personal doctor and say, please write it, I forgot about. And you go to the pharmacy and will take this. It's the other hand, it's a very funny situation. It's only in the United States, there are 5,000, approximately 5,000 deaths per year only because the doctors' high-trending prescriptions are not clear, and in pharmacy they give not this medicament. I don't speak about the time, the basic of the time, but you need the paper. So that means that the doctors and medicaments are reaching to you more quicker as before. X-Road Europe introduced, it's a, you know, I explained this, it's a X-Road, it's a core system or the changing of the data. That means that your computer are connected with different data, and these things are in your computer, or there are a lot of different servers, but all the things, all the information in your screen, on your screen. And we try to introduce this X-Road, but system as well, but you know, a lot of countries, they would like to elaborate their own ones. It's okay. But some countries are still very interesting. For example, I think Azerbaijan, they bought license for X-Road system and built it up with the help of Estonian specialists. And I think their system is even more modern because they use the new data, new versions, and so on, so on. I'm afraid a bit because this project in Azerbaijan is a more, how to say, for the elite, not for everybody. But they were keen of. So after years of experiments, our closest neighbor, Finns, agreed that maybe this system are what they need. And it was signed. It's a principle, very nice picture about how does it might work. So you know, everywhere is security servers as well. I'm not touching today very much about the protections. Estonia is in computer security one of the leading countries as well. And for example, in Tallinn we have in Tallinn located NATO Cyber Defense Center. Because the first, how to say, the cyber attack in 2007 was directed to Estonia by certain reason, so we have a quite good competence in this, and we use it quite a lot of during Russia-Georgia war, and now we helped quite a lot of Ukrainians as well to secure the computers. So that means that you know, between Estonia and Finland we have a Gulf. It's 76 kilometers. There are a lot of discussion about to build a bridge or something, but it's very long and very expensive. But much more important is an ID bridge between each two countries. That means that it's all the information, social security, because a lot of Estonians working in Finland, Finns working in Estonia, we need this information to share it's much easier to avoid this double taxation, and of course for the business as well. Because the one main thing is that you can use electronic subscribing. And the very first, it was agreed by the prime ministers, then prime minister, now they are both are working as commissioner in the European Union. And yeah, in principle, it's a digital signature. It's very popular in Estonia, and it's quite common. Everybody, we are using this, even if it's possible to make handwritten next. But this is a showing, if you said that I agree and signed by the two. And it's some special container. This information you can always see and look. There. Let's very shortly what we see. I just would like to stop more. It's e-resident. It's a brand new thing. It's e-resident. Every citizen, or even not a citizen, everybody who would like, they will receive the e-residence from Estonia, if you like. It's a special card. That means that they can enter to Estonian e-space. What e-resident can do is digitally sign documents and contracts, verify the authenticity of signed documents, open the company in Estonia. In principle, via internet, it needs 18 minutes to open a company. Conduct e-banking and remote money transfer. If he or she has a business in Estonia, then Estonian tax service online, and you know, the Estonian taxation system is quite easy. We have almost 20% in principle with taxes everywhere. But still, this helps much more to solve this problem. Do we have time?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, I try to put in. Maybe we can start with 2 minutes explanation of the e-residency. No, it's good.
Hi, I'm Kaspar Korjus, e-residency program director. E-residency is Estonian digital identity given for.
We can just put in. Is it relevant?
Hi, I'm Kaspar Korjus, e-residency program director. E-residency is Estonian digital identity given for non-residents. As an entrepreneur, you can run location-independent business online. If you become a e-resident, you receive this kind of smart ID card. It gives you PIN 1 for authentication and PIN 2 for digital sign-up. As an e-resident, you can do 4 things. First, establish a company and administrate that online. Second, conduct e-banking and make online bank transfers. Third, declare taxes online and sign any document digitally. And fourth, you can now use any worldwide services which are open to you, for example, payment service provider. All of these services in a cost-efficient and hassle-free way, without any need to hire a local director. Actually, for Estonians, these services have been available over a decade already. Now Estonia is making a move towards a country without borders. To become an e-resident, go to our online application form, fill in all your data, and pay €50 state fee. Once you are approved, you need to go to the nearest Estonian foreign embassy, take your passport with you, and give your fingerprints, and you receive this card. Please note, however, that we are still in beta mode. There are many services and regulations which we still need to enhance. However, join us, give us feedback, and let's build up this new, interesting world together, where everybody in the world can run a location-independent business online.
Okay. Can go back, I guess. Is that yes? That's great. Okay, that's good. What the aim was, you know, Estonia is a 1.3 million people living, and everybody would like to be bigger and bigger. But in this sense, they aim to make Estonia bigger, but bigger by the friends mostly. You know, now is Estonia at such a stage that we are eager to develop these IT things and e-services more larger, but there are borders surrounding us. It's very strange because, you know, it's within EU you have a free movement of the labor force, free movement of the services, but if it's Dutch e-services, then we can see that there are not Schengen treaty or any kind of treaties, except very firm that each country, they said, no, e-services is our priority, and so on and so on. And that's we need to open. So-called e-agenda is for us very, very important. And Estonia, maybe this program is a small one. We can attract the people who would like to, who are more e-minded, who would like to make the easy business, and all these things, which are the big pluses in this e-governance, is that e-governance is transparent. Estonia is one of the less corrupted country in Europe and the world, because you don't need corruption if you have all the data you receive or information about medical care and so on and so on. I don't want to say we have no corruption. Yes, we have. It's everywhere. But this, if the information is open, then this means that there are certain laws that you say that public information has to be open and access in the internet for everybody. If public information, you have no right by the law to hide it. There are certain dates, if you have not, you have to put the actual information. All the ministries have to be put on the website. I remember when I worked in Foreign Ministry, Press and Information Department, and our department, by the technical reason, we were late 3 hours to put salaries of Foreign Ministry employees to the website. And then immediately one press representatives called and said, by the way, I informed us. And it was quite serious. We explained because of this technical reason. But anyway, you have to be quite tough in this questions. So, for the fans, what's new is going on, I recommend to look eestonia.com. There are a lot of information, and there are more detailed information about Estonian e-society. How does it work? What's pluses? Even a discussion might be minuses. And in the end, thank you very much for your attentions. And if you have any questions, as I said, I'm not IT specialist, but I have my own experience for approximately 15 years. And if you have questions, very welcome. Thank you.
So maybe before the questions of the audience, I would like maybe to ask, like Slovakia is quite a conservative country. The people here are conservative to new things, and I would like to know, how did Estonia handle its conservative citizens?
You know, our first Prime Minister from 1992, after we restored independence, was a conservative as well. And the same Prime Minister I said that who started with eGovernment was a conservative as well, by the views. So I think it's a question of the thinking and a question of the openness. After being so in Soviet, let's say, prison camp, everybody wanted in Estonia to be much opened. And then we realized that what does mean the openness? That means that we have to use all the things. We are very poor. We was poorest than Ukraine was in the 90s. And that means if you are open, and then the investment are coming more easy to Estonia. We have to attract the business. We have to be modern. What was in one hand was very easy because we had a very good neighbors. I mean, Sweden and Finland, which were very developed in the IT things and so on and so on. And now we will learn a lot from the Finns, from the Swedes, from the others. And now it's very good that they are our main collaborators. We work with them. About this conservatism, I think that I think that the Estonians are very lazy people, and you see that the computer things. There are a lot of things you don't need to go to shopping. You don't need to go to elections. You don't need to go to sometimes school. There are one things which is I know the students at the school are very, very angry. It's an e-school. In principle, I can learn everything what my son did at school. What does the homework, what is his behaving, and so on, so on. But that's a life. I'm very happy that it's not in my young years. But anyway, but I can communicate and receive information, not go far from us home. That means that Estonians like to be lazy, but it's an ultimate goal, and we are ready to make a hard work on one stage to be very lazy. I think it's what is needed to promote younger generation much more. Maybe Estonian Plus was really on the early 90s, that we had a young government, and some older people in government were very open for that. Of course, maybe they had a lack of experience very first years. Our Prime Minister was 31 when he started. When I worked in foreign ministry on the early 90s, I had someone said that, "Oh, you're so young diplomat." I said, "No, my minister is younger than I." So that means that you need much more trust the younger generation and fresh ideas. That's it. In Estonia, e-voting is supported almost all the parties, all parliament parties except one. They are a bit cautious about, but the reason is very simple. The electorate is much older, and a big part of the electorate is among the Russian-speaking populations, who are much more conservative maybe than the others.
And maybe what other services are going to be extended for like Estonia? What are the plans? I mean, currently, I think there are, for each service, there is an alternative, let's say, offline service. Are you planning to still keep the offline services, or even try to suppress them, or what are the future plans for e-government in Estonia?
The main goal is now so-called digital agenda. That means that the digital services we can use much more. That now is working with the Finns. Now our cooperation are going on with the Latvians and Lithuanians, because a lot of business companies are working there, a lot of businessmen, first of all from the neighbor states, and we try to convince them to use the same principles, and I think that pretty soon might be that really we can use digital signature in Latvia and Lithuania as well, to make common business, to make agreements and so on and so on. So I think with the Finns we would like to draw such a positive example, how does it work, and in principle it's economizing a lot of money. I don't speak about environment. Even when Estonia started so-called e-governance, that means that all the documentation is in computer, and also calculations that how many forests was economized, because before it was a rule that in government session each law or bill is printed out and so on and so on. Now it's everything is on computer. Even more, if the government members are put in yes, then this information after 5 minutes is spread by the all information. Now, yes, decision made, now start to work. Not waiting that what they did and so on and so on. So it's a huge economizing of the time, and for some countries I think it's very important, as I mentioned, it's a very efficient way to fight with the corruption as well. So the current situation, of course, there are plans that we spread more e-residence number. There are aimed that there will be 2025 some 10 millions maybe. There are the others that we are working for the highly speed broadband, because you know we need more speed, because the programs need much more information and so keyboards. But the current situation that there will be some special service, it's not so easy to do, because in principle the main services you can find in e-environment anyway. I named here that all the information you can find in this e-card and the tickets. In Tallinn capital, by the way, the public transport is free of charge for the local people, so it's not anymore so useful. But in principle is that I have with me only one card. I don't need any other banking cards or discount cards and so on. All my information I need is on one card. It's my travel license, it's my health cards, everything. To be minimum, and all this information, access to this information is somewhere. Still, we need to make some steps, because some companies, they said we need separate cards, or some banks, they said that no, our cards, but it needs the time. But I think that there will be not such, how to say, revolutions or very big things. We very much hope that our neighbor states and then EU can follow the same path, and it's made much easier for communication, documentation and business as well.
Thank you. You noticed the number 30% for the e-voting, 30% of the population didn't do the voting through the e-system. quite honestly, this looks to me like a lower number than I would maybe expect. How so? Why is the number not bigger? I mean, like you would expect that you know, the weather is not good, the men are lazy. Why only 30%?
Right. You know, this researchers are saying that the voting person is a quite conservative thing. There are people, the older people, they would like to go to the polling station. It's a kind of part of party or something. They go some Sunday morning, fresh shirt, tie, and so on and so on. There are some version of, yes, still some people are not trusting very much. But Estonia, I think now it's approximately 10 years we use this voting system. The very first time it was 2.5%. The second time was a 5 point something. The third time 20. Each time it's doubled. If it's the same way, I'm not sure that the next elections, I think there will be this European elections, I guess, European Parliament election, or there will be 60. But I think some 40–45% would be. We have to take account that elder people are not so eager to vote via computer. They can, yes, they can use maybe the banking things and so on, or ask. But in principle, they would like to go to polling stations and vote for favorite candidates, and to be sure that this happens such way. This is their rights. But I think the younger generation are most devoted to the e-elections.
Okay, thank you. Now we would maybe give some word to the audience. Like we have here also, I see Jan Suchal, which is quite active in the let's say e-government scene, but in the non-government e-government sphere, like and he has also the Estonia card. Maybe Jan, you mentioned to me that you will have some questions.
Okay, my first question is what's the price for this? What was the budget? Or what's the average price for such a project like M parking or X roads and so on?
Yeah.
Before and together to during whole time if you build in the government.
So I will also add maybe a context, because here in Slovakia we had a project which
don't say the number.
okay, so I won't say the number, but we had and also have many projects about e-government, e-health that quite honestly don't show any results. I mean, they are more or less literally burning money. So the question to you is, what's the cost of effective e-government in Estonia?
In Estonia, the percentage of the public money was very low. It was, as I mentioned, it was cooperation with the banking sector. When I mentioned about that this legend would happen in the early 2000 and so on, that we have no money, this means that it was not done without money. It was a banking sector money because they realize that this money return pretty soon to them as well, because they are using banking channels, they are using banking sector and so on and so on. So it was with mobile banking. Because the mobile companies, they realize that it's a profit for them. Because they are using, they earn money afterwards. And it's a good to invest money into there and to do it. And in principle, the government has to make such kind of rules and laws and in principle that's it. That was quite small money. I don't have these numbers, but public money was used quite small amount.
But like 10 million, 100 million, 1 million.
Euros, you mean? Maybe 10 millions. It's very hard to calculate because you know it was big discussion. We discussed here. We mentioned here tax flat things, and then we calculate. You said if you are not, one is a tax flat. One is in Estonia. This component of this tax flat is that your profit are not taxed when you invest this money. That's what they say, that it's socialistic. Because if you invest this money, that means you create new jobs and take new employers. If you take the money away, then you have to pay. Then was calculation that how the state budget will survive if there are not profit tax for companies. Everybody will show that, oh, we put the money and so on, at least the first years. And it was calculation that it was maximum only 2% of the budget. But if you create the new jobs, then you tax these peoples and this money return quite immediately. And the pretty same things happen with these key things. I think it's so very hard to calculate because you have to calculate all expenditures what has did by banks, by government, and so on. And I think that in this case it's really very crucial, this cooperation of the public sector and private sector. And it's very important that the private sector understood that this money will come back to them.
Thank you. Just to note, the number in Slovakia was around 800 million euro, which were invested to eGovernment here. So just a comparison to this.
It's all together.
Yeah, it was like from 2008, like a big program for eGovernment and informatization of the society, and yeah, till today it is like 820 million, like so.
So only in the public, not all together. In the public.
Public money.
Just public money.
Yes, so you mentioned that Estonia, a small country with post-communistic history, looks very similar to me, like Slovakia. But what do you think is the difference that some countries can be more effective, innovative in the fields of e-government, and some countries that have very similar situation, that have the money, but still no results. So, what would you say is the key aspect? I mean, of success in e-government? What is it like? Is it the society, or is it the government itself, or is it location, or is it corporate sphere? What do you think is like the difference or the key aspect?
I think that here is a very important as well the continuity of the government's decision making. So that means that even if the government is changing, they cannot change the rules. If it's agreed by previous government that some rules of which relating to e-governance, so on, then you have to keep it. And that means that there are very important that in this decision making are involved not only the coalition or leading party or coalition party, but the others as well, to secure it. In one hand, if the private sector is much more involved, then it's help, how to say, to keep the parties under some certain control. Because parties, they are like very much, sometimes big businessmen as well. And they would not like to fight with everyone. Here again is the other hand that it's need continuity and collaboration, cooperation even between the private sector as well. They have to be on the quite same position and to follow the rules agreed before, because it doesn't work that if some business find that if I make such turn, then I immediately earn here much more. It's maybe it sounds a bit corporative in this case, but I think that it was quite clear the leading banks and companies, they understood that yeah, they had to invest this money, but the money will be returned after 5 years. If someone was calculating that if government make some public procurement and I earn immediately a lot of money, it doesn't work in principle. And I think the Estonian plus was that first quite small, and it was a very wide consensus between in these key issues between the businessmen and between the government, and it does work, and they're still working because there are not enemies who are fighting against that. We have no big number of politicians and parties who said that that e-things it's from devils.
Okay, maybe right.
I would like to ask something concerning the social aspect in the nation and conservatism in the nation. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, that it has to do something with a predominant religion in a nation. Even in people who are not considering themselves believing. Then the question is, what is the predominant religion in Estonia?
Okay, so to recap the question, there was a hint about conservatism and religion, and the question was, what is the main religion in Estonia, and it was like a demographic question about religion.
Yes, there are some research done that Estonians might be one less religiously connected people in Europe. At the same time, yes, the leading religious Estonia is Lutherans, mostly Protestantism, but there are quite big number of the Orthodox. I mean, mostly Russian. We have two Orthodox churches. One is more, how to say, Moscow. It's a Moscow Patriarchate, and the other is the Constantinople Patriarchate connected. Again, the church 1944 left from Estonia. Who stayed in Estonia were killed, and then who survived, they returned to Estonia in 1991. So therefore we have two Orthodox churches. Very small number of Catholics, but very strong community because a lot of artists and teachers and philosophers are Catholics. But yes, I have read about that maybe the Nordics and Protestants are more open for the new things, but for me it's very hard to explain it or so on. I think that it's not so much mixed with religious and things, but there might be some cultural background as well.
Just to know that religion is like an important topic in Slovakia.
I'd like to ask about one issue that you mentioned. You already said that Estonia has also experiences in providing assistance also to the other countries that are trying to build their e-government project. You mentioned that you provide some license to the Azerbaijan and assisted other experts.
We sell to one company, we sell it to Serbia, we provide.
As Mr. Paulis knows, Slovakia is also trying to build its e-government project and trying to reach the same effort, same results as Estonia did. Do you ever that if either your embassy, some of the Estonian institutions were already asked by Slovak authorities for consultation, for assistance, for any help?
So to recap, is there like any official cooperation between the Slovak Republic and Estonia in the fields of e-government?
I know that some of IT specialists, they had contact with Estonia, between Estonian and Slovak people, because you know it's a field that's very international. Why Estonia is keen of these IT things as well? That's a reason that, in principle, you can stay in Estonia and you are everywhere in the world. If you are writing a script, for example, that means that you can earn the same money if you are in Estonia or if you are, for example, in Silicon Valley or wherever. The salary market is one everywhere. Therefore, for example, the guys who made the Skype, they were in Estonia. Well, they can be the other places as well. There has been some contacts I heard in Estonia, but I don't know anybody who used directly embassy. There are some people, they ask about contacts and some journalists and so on, but usually you know, these contacts are arising some in international meetings and so on, and what I hope very much, because as I mentioned, the President of Slovakia going to pay a visit to Tallinn, and he is visiting the Cyber Defense Center, visiting e-showroom, and I think that it might be quite big, how to say, kick for the more closer cooperation between Estonian and Slovakian specialists. By the way, the things which we have in Estonia is a big lack of good specialists. I think Estonian leading IT companies, they are always ready to recruit the new guys for this business, because there are really problems, because there are quite a lot of countries in Africa, in Asia and everywhere. They ask some more close cooperation and so on, but we have a lack of good specialists to do their thing. Maybe one reason was that Estonian IT specialists, they had quite easy life, because during past 10-15 years, they had a lot to do in Estonia. There's a lot of big field of the work, and they did not need to find projects beyond of Estonia. And now the situation has changed, but I think the good IT specialists, they are always very welcomed in Estonia, and not only because to come physically, but work here and for Estonian companies, or I think that these things are very mutual. And always Estonia, we're very open to learn, because, you know, if some country, IT sector would like to elaborate their own core system and so on, so it's very okay for us. But if they find that this our X-road system is for studying or even using, it's very good as well. As I mentioned, long time our neighbor Finns tried to find the other system, and then they find that it's much more sense to use it what we have in Estonia, because it's working, and in principle we have a 10-time experience of testing of this. Just to mention about the trusting again, why the people trust things, because there have been a few times, because when you entered your e-environment, your personal data, then you can see who was you entered, and you can see that somebody was there who is not your name. Then you have right to ask who this man was. Maybe it was a police officer. Maybe he had right, but not all the police have rights. There has been 2 or 3 cases when the police officer entered your personal data and checked it. And one was a quite high-level police lady, but she had no right to check this guy. And at the end of the day, it was clear that this guy, she entered the data, she was her boyfriend, how to say, worked in the same field as his boyfriend, was working some business making. And boyfriend asked, maybe you check out who is this guy in business. And it was a very serious story. It was a criminal case, of course, and there was even there's a discussion about 3 years sentence behind the bar. But then, okay, at the end of the day, she got 5 years, but not behind the bars, of course. And there's 2 or 3 more police officers, because they learn the data and they had no right to enter it. In this case, you always see, it's electronic, you can see the path, somebody entered. But if you make, I don't know, paper copies, nobody knows.
Right, I mean, that's fantastic, because you have also total control of the data, like the person knows who handles the data, how. I mean, that sounds really amazing for us here, because we look for Estonia like the inspiration, and maybe to whom did Estonia look for inspiration when it started its e-government path? Who was the inspiration for your country?
I think Estonian case is it's always our inspirations and our neighbors. And the very early stage, we know everybody that was a Nokia or the other solution, Elcotec, and then our closest partners and neighbors, Finns. But as always with the neighbors, we would like to make better than they. And I think it was one of the reasons why I find that something we can be or develop better or quicker and so on, so on. You know, it's For small dates, the options are quite limited. We have no. For us, it's not possible to make the peak factories in Estonia, or even to ask investors to build up, because we have no enough labor force for that. That means that the small sectors, and services, it's mainly our cup of tea. And if it does work, I think it's very good. A lot of say that maybe yes, it's Estonian role in this e-governance and it's overrated. Maybe yes, even this PR has been even too much. We are sometimes very surprised that the leading newspapers and leading websites and people are saying, no, it's a very good working and so on, so on. But the other hand, that means that there are services which people can solve by internet, by using the e-services. And as I mentioned, I'm quickly lazy, and for me it's very good.
Thank you. Maybe some question from the audience? Right?
Okay, so maybe I would like to ask, how was it all managed? I mean, I guess it was a lot of projects, a lot of work done. So did you hire a company? Was there a governmental institution that did an integration, or that set up rules how the company should implement the things, which technologies should be used open as opposed to closed solutions?
So to recap, how was the whole process of implementation of the e-government?
Here, government trusts the people who are working in this field and scientists. Of course, there was a number of people who, quite voluntarily, to be frank, helped us abroad. There were a lot of people who tried to something similar, maybe to or make in, I don't know, Silicon Valley and so on, or much bigger state. But then they find that how to say, the bureaucracies are too big, or the old e-solution, which is still more or less are working, and they hamper all this and so. There were some people who get maybe to advising, because for them Estonia was a kind of project as well, or testing the things. But mainly it was Estonian scientists and IT guys, and they advised the government, and they said what kind of judicial background, what kind of laws and bills you really need to secure the things. Because, on the other hand, of course, there are some part which is big business as well. Because because it's a work of the technoparks and so on, and if you are work out some very good solution, you can sell it in everywhere. Very practical things. By the way, a lot of good IT workers are in Estonia involved. Unfortunately, big gambling. You know, there's a lot of gambling in internet, or how it's called about. There are a big sector in Estonia who work for that because of the money, and then a lot of try to attract these IT specialists from there, and to find the same salaries. But I think it's again the key word is the trusting each other, and trusting the specialists, and because the other things what has happened, a lot of specialists, or let's say ideologists, from the leading IT companies, they has come to work for the government. All the advisors to the Prime Minister office, to the Ministry of the Economy and Technology, and so on. For example, even this man who run this e-residence project. He was, before he was head of maybe the most successful Estonian IT company. He was working in Africa, in Europe, and so on and so on. And then they find that I earned enough money and it's a new challenge to do something in the other one. And he is a Undersecretary of State on this ministry. And for them, I think it's quite good when they are feeling the support by the government and of course by the president as well. I think it's personally for them it's very important as well.
A lot of times used word trust. My question is, in Estonia, is some attack for security for the system eGovernment, and you have some experience with it? How to manage the security attacks for the systems? Because a lot of sensitive data is inside.
Yes, a lot of times the word trust was mentioned, but how do you deal with potentially jeopardizing the trust?
You mean a part of this protection things as well?
Yeah, like this, because sometimes some people around the world stolen the data and using for other or sell it or something. You know?
2007, the first attack to the Estonian websites happened because of political reason. I remember I was sitting behind the computer and then I saw that first was melting Prime Minister website, then President website, and what great is then it was attacked very hardly newspapers and news agencies and banks. First because, you know, it's I would say the news were very important. Then it's a time when Estonia moved the Soviet soldier monument from the center to the cemetery. And it was kind of testing as well. Then it was why banks? Because they are not politically, but they know very well, because if you have a 98% transfer via banks, everything, that it's a very serious thing. But then it was organized very quickly, the protection or defense, walls around, and this was very carefully studied, these things. Okay, there were, after some Russian young students said that, oh, there's something order, then they denied because it was clear that it was international things. By the way, the most attacks, I mean by the IP addresses, came from which country?
China.
Russia?
I think China was the third one. Russia was the fourth or fifth. The first one was Egypt. The second was US. US.
Yeah.
USA?
Yeah. But in Egypt, I think these guys still know that they will send massive attacks.
You mean DDoS attack, but
it seems that it was clear that the computers in Egypt was very badly protected. Pretty same was in the United States, by the way, because still it's a leading country, but same times there are a lot of computers which are not registered, which are not protected, and so on and so on. And it's very easy to put kind of Trojas or things, and they just were thinking that why my computer today is very slow, but they attack the stolen computers. Therefore, it's very, very hard to say that if there is something happening, then it's coming from some certain country. Of course, we know that when similar happened in Georgia, for example, 2009, yes, Then it was very easy to learn to former experience, and mostly that means that all the main servers from Georgia were resettled to Estonia. And in principle, because of former experience, it was built up some more secure wall, and therefore it's why the NATO defense center of the cyber defense was in principle created in Tallinn, because we had some experience, and I think it's a very good center. And it's not only NATO countries, it's a very close cooperation with the Finns, with the Swedes, the common trainings and so on, so on. But it's really, you know, you cannot develop the e-society and e-services without these protections. It's kind of crime if you take this, but what about the other ones? Because you directed your peoples to use more e-services, but if it's not protected in a certain level, then you, how to say, encourage them and encourage some crime and other things. So it's a very big part of say, e-services. It's a protection of the data and to secure all this system.
Maybe some question from the audience. Okay, thank you. I think that, as I said, that Estonia is an inspiration, and maybe my last question for today will be that you mentioned that you also worked with Kazakhstan, and do you think that maybe the Estonian solution can be copy-pasted to Slovakia? Like, what would be the burden, you know, like?
I have been here, I've been in Vienna roughly 1 month and a half. And when I study this Slovakia political situation and social problems and everything, I really find a lot of similarities. I think the Slovakia population is a bigger territory, or less bigger, but pretty same problems in your society. I mean, demographical situation. Of course, we have no, maybe this migration crisis so on, but we have to take some people. And I think GDP is a pretty same level as well. Minimum salaries, I think 400 now will be, yes. Estonia 430. The average salary, I think same, some 1,000 euro. So it's pretty similar things, and therefore I think that it's quite easy, I think, to understand each other in this situation, because for us it's a big challenge because the salaries are low. On the other hand, the next door, for example, in Norway, the salaries are very high, and in Finland as well, we are not ready to compete with the salaries from our neighbors in the Nordic countries. Same time, the services in Estonia are lower, therefore it's some Finns are very keen to work in Estonia, and same time more and more foreign specialists are coming to Estonia to work. Yes, we know it's a discussion, this quotas or rate of the migrations. It's 550 in Estonia, for Estonia, and it's step by step start to work. But at the same time, during this year from the third countries. I mean, outside of EU, there are more than 3,000 working licenses was given, and a lot of from the Asia country, from North Africa, and so on, so on. But mostly they are, yes, specialists with the families and so on, so on. I think that this IT sector can be really, if we have a mutual interest, we have to encourage it. And I think that we can find, or IT specialists can find very lot of common, and I think that both sides might be very interesting.
Okay, so thank you for this discussion, and yeah, very glad to have you here. And maybe we will switch to the less formal Slovak discussion about the local state here in Slovakia, and I know that we have people that would maybe like to share their interest in this field, or maybe to discuss what we can do better. So thank you.
Can I ask one question as well?
Yeah, sure.
I have a question about how it's work here, the IT specialists. Do you have some common roof organization or something similar? No? Involuntary, not organized by government. Some union, I mean.
We don't.
Never heard.
We don't. We don't.
It's an individual basis, it's a contact and...
Yes.
Maybe Facebook groups.
It's not bad,
I mean, we have volunteers, like people which do also projects for their own behalf, and some of these projects don't even ask for money or much money, but the problem is that there is like a wall of corruption, because the IT is misused to you know, because you can spend millions on IT, and the normal common people which don't work in IT, they won't understand. I mean, if you like waste 1 million euro on medical equipment, then it's like a big thing. But the problem here is that millions are wasted on government solutions, and it's not a big thing here amongst common people. And people who try to change that, we have a few of them here, are hitting against the wall of this system, which doesn't want to open itself and to be more transparent, because if you open yourself, it means you have to be more transparent, and this is something that that some people in the system don't want. So that's a little bit frustrating, but we have many people, like they're astronauts in this field, and they invest their own time in maybe showing the people that solutions for the government doesn't need to cost X millions, but that if they are doing for the purpose of doing something better, then it can be done. And
Yeah, there are quite a few of them, and I think a big problem is that all the data and everything is closed. I mean, you said that that there is openness, that there is trust, and I think maybe that's something that is missing here, because the trust is missing. There is very little trust in the government, in also in the justice, and so there is this trust is missing, and the system is closed. So there's a problem, and people try to open it, and yeah, but it's a hard battle. So.
Here's a very important, I'm sorry, but anyway, that you can always play the, how to say, data protection to keep some part of society closed or party system. You said, oh, it's a data protection, we are very worried about the individual data closed. It's a, and sometimes then people say, oh, yes, it's very important because I don't like that some personal data are going outside. But on the end of the day, you really know that the same people can put in Instagram, Facebook, much more information about I don't know, illness and things really he has, because usually there are not too much to hide, because there are not the criminals who hide. But the other hand, yes, it's not I don't know here so much, but in a lot of countries the governments, they use it that so we cannot do that because there are personal protection of the people. But sometimes it's not personal protection, it's a personal protection of some of the persons or persons.
Okay. So, tak chcel by ešte niekto teda tak nejak dáme diskusiu ešte nejakú ohľadne situácie na Slovensku? Ja by som teda bol veľmi rád. The audience is quite tired, and I think that we will close the discussion for today. And
thank you very much, and you know that it's possible to be residents, and embassy is just 1 hour away.
Where?
In Vienna.
Still in Vienna. Let's work to open the embassies on capitals.